Um, and Rabbi Cohen, I'm also going to make you a co-host so that you can always unmute yourself because I may have to mute the conversation just in case somebody unmutes themselves, like I'm doing right now. I'm going to mute everybody because we were getting some background noise, and now I'm going to ask you to unmute. There we go. Okay. All right. Well, we should get started because our time is limited this morning. It's a busy day for smachot here in Toronto. So we have the special honor of being able to have a conversation this morning with Rabbi Dr. Jack Cohen. And Shavua Tov, everybody. Let me introduce you to Rabbi Dr. Jack Cohen, who is speaking to us from his recreational place. He's decided he's agreed to take some time from his valuable summertime and to be able to speak with us about shidduchim and about strategies for successful relationships and successful dating. Rabbi Dr. Cohen has lectured worldwide on all subjects of Jewish thought. He serves as a daily lecturer for young men in various Brooklyn yeshivot on many subjects, as well as co-director of the Father and Son Minyan at Keter Zion Torah Center and the director of teen education at Congregation Tilat Yitzchak in Brooklyn. He's created and taught original curriculum on successful dating strategies for men and was recently featured on the Netflix series Jewish Matchmaking. Welcome, Rabbi Dr. Jack Cohen. I guess the first question that I would have for you is, tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been involved in shidduchim, and what made you decide to get into this very sometimes challenging area of Jewish life.
Good morning, Rabbi Gorovkin, and good morning to everyone out there. It's an honor and a pleasure. I am live from Toms River, New Jersey, which is where the wife and I like to spend a few weeks. We host our grandchildren, and we get to connect during the year. As we all know, we lead very productive lives. I had the pleasure to be able to give a little background to Rabbi Gorovkin early this morning on my, the history of my life. Just to quickly sum it up, I was born in Cairo, Egypt. My father and my family had huge roots in the Middle East, specifically from Syria, and they had come there via South America. My father was always what we call an ish tziburi. He was a person who was very involved in the tzibur. To his discredit, he stayed a little too long in Cairo because he wanted to make sure that the synagogues were not pillaged by the local Arab population. Though when I was 7 years old during the 6-Day War, I watched them throw Molotov cocktails into the synagogues and blow up some of the shuls. Thank God we were able to get out successfully. That is a story in itself. I think I should share that story with you. It's a fascinating story, how we got out of Cairo. Baruch Hashem, I just want to know, later on in my life, I found out that my future father-in-law was sitting in a IDF tank listening to every conversation between Assad and Nasser, who was the dictator of Egypt. My father-in-law was big time in IDF intelligence. I married an Israeli girl. But years later, after we got out of Egypt, I was living in Miami Beach, and it was the 40th anniversary of the 6-Day War, and the Hamodia newspaper was featuring in their magazine weekend edition. It said Spanish Angel of Mercy from the 6-Day War. And it talks about how most of the Jews, the males, were taken into custody and put in jail with the threat of execution by Nasser, because he wanted revenge because the Israeli Air Force had wiped out his entire Air Force. And then my father sat in the dungeon outside Cairo, and Rabbi Kalmanovitz from the Mir Yeshiva in New York calls the State Department, or Karofkin, listen to this, and he said, did you see the New York Times story that Nasser is about to kill all the Jews? Now, in that magazine article, they had published the New York Times original article with all the people that were in prison. My father was in that list. And so what happens? Who answers the phone? There was an apprentice from Harvard Law School by the name of Nathan Lewin. Nathan Lewin would go on to be Shalom Rubashkin's lawyer and get him out of jail. Mm-hmm. So he takes this call from the rabbi, and the rabbi says, do you realize they're about to execute and assassinate all the Jewish males in Egypt? What are you doing about it? So he says, I don't know. He says, we got to do something. Meanwhile, it was Erev Shabbat, and he had to get back to his apartment in Virginia. So he leaves the State Department where he's clerking, and he gets on the highway, and he's stopped by a Virginia patrol officer, highway patrol. He says, are you Mr. Lewin? The State Department is looking for you. They said there's some rabbi doesn't stop calling from New York. You got to run back to the State Department. So he runs back. His supervisor says, do you have any ideas? So since Nathan Lewin is very well read, he had read that Franco, the fascist dictator of Spain, had charata over the Spanish Inquisition. And he said, I have an idea. Let me call him and see if he'll issue passports to all the Jewish families and make them Spanish citizens. He calls him up and he says, yes, I'll do it. On condition that we're going to reroute everyone to Europe. If they decide to go to Israel, they can't say a word because I don't want a problem with the Arab League. And that's how we met my father on a big cruise liner.
Wow.
Outside Cairo, they went to Barcelona, and from Barcelona to my aunt in Paris, and from there, the great community where I grew up in the Sephardic community in Brooklyn, which leads me to my next, to answer your question, to my next piece, and that is when I landed there, one of the great rabbis of the 20th century had just moved into the community of the Syrian community, right there on Ocean Parkway, which is a big thoroughfare, a man by the name of Avigdor Miller. Mm-hmm. He would go on to influence my life from the age of 12. Every decision that I had in business in my life, he made, including my kala. He had a big hand in that one. And so living in that community, we were taught to become involved in the community and to help in every way that we can. My passion, I went to Yeshiva University. My passion was medicine. I became a doctor. I specialized in sports medicine and orthopedics. And after I came back from a stint at the Olympic Games in 1984, I set up a practice in that area. But right away, we got to work helping people. I was very much involved in Yom Ha'atzmaut programs and Siyum Mishnayot during the year, boys and girls. We used to do a lot of chesed together. And so it became natural to want to help people. And my Rabbi Miller encouraged me very strongly to go into this area. So what I did was I would work as a physician 1 to 8, and 9 to 12 as a Maggid Shir in yeshivot for mostly, I guess, the Ashkenaz world who came home from Israel. And now I would teach them Chumash, Mishnah, Gemara. And these 22, 23, 24-year-old boys would ask me after class, they're going out, they're dating, they want my opinion as to what they think about the girl. I was clueless, Rabbi Karofkin. But I started reading the material 25, 30 years ago, every book I could get my hands on, and every subject matter and every article, until I started finding myself under many chuppot, one after the next. I would be invited. I had a bracha here, a bracha there. I traveled. I also was very involved in a shul of boys who moved into New York. A lot of boys move into New York from outside communities to get married, etc. And I was sort of co-rabbi under the wings of another rabbi. I got tremendous experience for many years helping these guys. A lot of them didn't have family locally. A lot of them made it by my house. Well, I was under a lot of their chuppot as well. And then I got a lot of experience. In
That's
2000,
great.
I decided, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, now we understand the background and how you got into this. Yeah. And certainly under the tutelage of Rabbi Avigdor Miller, Zichrono Livracha, it certainly means that you've accumulated a tremendous amount of wisdom over the years. Here's what I would ask you. You've been in this for at least a few decades, it sounds like. Tell me what you've seen, what has changed in the world of Shidduchim in the Orthodox world over the last number of years that you've been involved in Shidduchim. Clearly, there's been some sort of shift. You can call it an evolution or devolution. I'm not sure what to call it. But tell us the good, the bad, and the ugly about how things have changed over the years.
Okay. So the good is that obviously we've seen a worldwide spike in interest in Torah learning. Many people have gravitated to becoming more frum, more religious, and as a result, more people are learning Torah, whether it's in yeshivot or whether it's out after work. And we've seen that grow out tremendously. We've seen that population of people that are Shomrei Torah mitzvos growing exponentially. The bad that we have is we're definitely suffering from technology. We're suffering from in the palm of your hand, you have a disease called TMC, too much choice. You can, in the palm of your hand, scroll through thousands and thousands of dating resumes and photos. And that's where the Yetzer Hara is blinding so many people. Whereas they start having dimyonot, fantasies of the ideal person that they'd like to get married to. And many of them wasting precious years of their life. As a matter of fact, because of the Netflix show, one of the people that I used to work out with at the local JCC in New York 30 years ago calls me up. He's 58 and he wants a 40-year-old woman. I said, it's not realistic. You're better off if you're lucky. If I'm lucky, I could try to even get you a 48-year-old woman who's maybe frozen her eggs. No, I want a 30-year-old woman. People are holding on to their fantasies of the past, and as a result, not moving the needle, not being realistic. So if I had to say, Rabbi Korofkin, what's the problem that we're facing? A lack of realism. A lack of realism, posturing by people, not wanting to, many guys today, not wanting to do this, the cavalier thing, the proper thing, to travel and to date and to meet the girl. She has to come to me. It's on my terms. Gaiva has gotten involved for sure. And especially in a community like Toronto.
People have started to confuse virtual reality with real reality, right? And,
yes.
And would you say that, how do you feel about shidduch resumes and photos in shidduch resumes? Is that an asset? Is it a liability?
It's a must. It's a must because our world has grown exponentially. This is no longer the shtetl of Eastern Europe, and or no longer the Lower East Side, or where everyone could tell you, oh, I know his mother and I know his grandfather, his uncle. So that's just a necessary tool today to get moving. So I don't have a radical opinion on the matter. I think it's a necessary tool. I think it's to try to do away with pictures is the exercise with futility. You need it.
I hear you. Now, with that said, should if you were advising a person of various different ages, if they were going to start dating for the first time, let's say either it's they're a young adult and they want to start dating, or perhaps they've lost a spouse or they're divorced and they want to get back into the game, so to speak. Would you recommend that they sit down with someone like yourself, a good coach, and prepare a resume, take professional photos? Or should they just try to do it naturally and be themselves and just throw, and just take their own photo on their phone? How would you guide a person who's entering into this very confusing and sometimes disorienting world of shidduchim?
Well, I'm going to start with a quote. If you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. I didn't become a dating coach because of the parnasah. I did it because I saw there was such a great need for this area. I had, Baruch Hashem, I'd been involved. I ran Avot Ovanim, and I still do for many, many years. There was what to keep busy with, but there was such a vacuum of a need. So the answer to your question is absolutely A. I spend quite a bit of my day preparing people, mentoring people, coaching people. Much of it is clearing out their shitot. I'm a huge believer of creating a top 10 list of your needs, not your wants. Your wants are superficial. Your wants are fantasies. Money, tall, good looking, will take me to Eretz Yisrael every Chag, has an apartment in Miami Beach. Those are wants. That's not what's going to make you happy. How often have we seen many people break up because of money? No, we need to. So I'll teach people, I'll help them create a top 10 list. I have written thousands of resumes. Yes, I'm a strong believer in writing a powerful resume, putting out there a great picture. I have sent over 1,500 people, 2,000 people for professional shoots in the New York area alone. And then I have also shown them how to communicate. It's critical you learn how to communicate. Much of what's disheartening about a shidduch that doesn't go forward is because the communication is poor, or the questioning line isn't targeted effectively, or you're not showing or expressing an interest. When I see a good shidduch go down and he or she tells me, I'm just not feeling it, usually more than likely they haven't dug deeply in conversation. So I have, and I'm going to send it to you. I created a PDF about 4 years ago. I was on a major podcast called Headlines, David Lichtenstein.
Yes.
We were speaking about the rash of broken engagements. And I said to him, it's because people are not asking proper questions and digging deeply enough and getting to know the person well enough. So I went ahead and created a PDF of all the questions you could possibly ask, the most of them that would be germane to a great dating relationship, and I'll be happy to share it with you. And you can send it to the Chevra, the Kahal over there.
I think that would be very,
asking
very
great questions
valuable.
is key.
Yeah, let me ask you. Let me ask you a general question, because I speak with a number of people who are involved with shidduchim in our own community. I see Sally Berman's on the call today. She's a wonderful, caring individual who really helps a lot of people. My wife, Karen, is very involved, and she's also a very caring individual. There seem to be different kinds of people in today's world where everything is, there's such an emphasis on the individual in society today. And it affects so many different dynamics of Jewish life as well. Is it possible that there are many people today who feel that they should get married but really don't want to get married? Is there, in other words, what I'm saying is it possible that maybe there are some people who would be better off not getting married? And unless they really feel this need, they shouldn't waste your time or the time of other concerned individuals. And how would they communicate that message if that were the case?
First of all, I think that Hashem made human beings innately with the need for a significant other in their life. We need company. We're like a watch. We're multi-gears. It's very difficult in this world to exist on your own, to be a person onto your own island. I think that what has happened was, especially for women, the need to succeed, especially living in the New York area where I see a host of young professionals, they have artificially submerged the natural desire to get married in the greater desire, or rather they get caught up in the wheel of professional success. And that would explain the burgeoning population of the Upper West Side. And now we see the same thing in Washington Heights. I think that very few people out there don't want to get married, but many people get sidetracked or distracted from that goal. And then when they wake up, then they are playing with a paradigm that's antiquated or outdated, and they're not bringing that paradigm forward. For example, if you're 40 years old, don't ask me for a 24-year-old or a 25-year-old. You have to start thinking maybe someone who's previously married with a child or two. It's realizing that if you understand that you're here for the concept of leaving a mitzvah, a heritage, and perurvu, instead of having a fantasy that you'd like to catch up to your friends who have 7 or 8 or 9 children, you'd be happy with 1 or 2 and be able to do that. What we're seeing today? You won't believe it. You know how many women are coming to me that are having children without a husband?
Yes,
it's crazy.
I've seen it. Yeah, we see it also here. Yeah.
And in Israel, they pay for it. The government is paying for it.
Now, in all fairness, Rabbi Cohen, I know of an individual who really did want to get married, but it just, life did not present her with a suitable mate. So,
right.
In other words, I think that we have to also be somewhat, it's very, very difficult halachically to guide someone who's considering that path in life to say, well, I'm single, my biological clock is running out. I'm not sure, if I'll ever find my mate. I want to have at least a child of my own. It's very, very, and I gave a whole shiur on this as far as how to guide a person. It's not simple, but at the same time, I have a tremendous amount of compassion for especially a woman who's in that position, because, a lot of times it's not because she wasn't trying very, very hard. It just, there are certain situations in life where it happens. Yeah. Right. So, so I mean, I completely hear where you're coming from. It also resonates with me. I mean, the Torah's, the very first chapter of the Torah talks about the idea of a man and a woman finding each other and building a life together. It's part of why God put men and women together to procreate. That's the whole purpose of our existence, in a sense. And so obviously that would be the optimal situation. But, one of the challenges in our community, and people have written about this as well, is finding significant roles and validating the importance of a person who is single and for whatever reason finds themselves in a position in life where they're not married, and perhaps they won't get married. And I think that it's important to sort of validate those people, as well as, let people who want to get married know that, there's never give up hope. But at the same time, you can find fulfillment and purpose even outside of the context of marriage. Would you agree with that?
1,000%. There's going to be an element of the pie that's not part of that whole basket. It's just fact of life. It's a statistical mitziut. You're absolutely right.
All right. Let me
try
ask
to
you
give
another.
Encouragement.
Yeah. Let me ask you another question. We find a lot of times there's different hashkafot circulating within the Orthodox community, from the right to the left, and everyone has, everyone, shivim panim laTorah, elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. Everyone has a point. What is the role of a parent in their child's shidduch prospects? Many times we've encountered situations where the parent may be overstepping the line a little bit, and the child is of a certain age where the child wants independence, but sometimes the parent interferes with the child's ability, the adult child's ability to be able to find a shidduch. Can you talk about that for a moment?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, it's interesting. I was at a brit milah of my brother's grandson in Deal, New Jersey the other day. A woman that I grew up with who was wearing pants. I grew up in an era where most of the women wore pants. That was fine. She come up to me. She said, "You were with my daughter, Rochelle?" I said, "Yeah." I haven't heard from Rochelle in 3-4 years. Rochelle's turning 40. So I said, "What's doing with her?" I had set her up with a few guys, modern Orthodox, it's fine. And she says to me, "I don't get involved. As a matter of fact, when she's still living at home." I said, "That's a ma'alah. That's a really incredible asset. Most 40-year-old women would be living by themselves. But when a guy comes to pick her up, she just says, 'Ma, scram, beat it, go upstairs,' because they want their independence." And she said to me, "Could you do me a favor, tell her," she texted me twice, "tell her not to take such hard political positions. I think that's what's getting her in trouble." But she's afraid to tell her. So yes, what should a parent's role be? To guide, to nurture, to give ahava, to teach red flags, to help elucidate for the child who he is and what he needs, who she is and what she needs, but not to overstep your bounds and to live your life through that child.
Well, I'll give you an illustration. Once in a while, I'm listed as a reference on a shidduch resume, right? So
Right.
Once in a while, I'll get a call from a parent where the child is already in their late 20s or early 30s. And at what stage should a parent say, you've reached a certain age? If you have questions, ask the reference yourself. Don't get the parent involved. In other words, what is there some kind of guidance that you can provide to a parent that once your children reach a certain age, they have to sort of allow the child to have independence in pursuing their own mate?
If I had to take an empirical number or a number from my involvements empirically, I would say around age 25, the person, the man or the woman, takes full responsibility at that point, with the parents having much less or minimal, if not no involvement anymore. Because at that point, they're working or they're productively involved in society in some aspect. But yeah, somewhere around mid-20s. That for sure, it becomes a little, uncomfortable for a person 26, 27 to have their parents involved. It's not, unless it's very from Haredi crowd where the parent, even then they're poking less because those people feel uncomfortable having a parent doing it for them or being involved in their lives. They're older now, they're mature adults, and they're earning money, and they're a very productive part of society.
Let me ask you, this is also a very touchy subject. A young man or a young woman comes to you for dating advice,
Mhm.
and you immediately notice something about their appearance. Let's say whether it's their grooming, their hygiene, that they're out of shape or something like that. How would you guide someone in a very delicate manner to help them like best prepare for success in the dating world? On the one hand, you want to validate every person for who they are and not try to change them. But at the same time, we all know that, Chazal themselves tell us that Isha Na'eh, that a beautiful woman is something that is marchib dato shaladam. It causes a person to have a sense of nachas and a sense of well-being. And we want everyone to be prepared for success. How would you prepare a young man or a young woman? And there's probably a difference between males and females in this respect, but it must be very, very difficult for you to finesse that. Is there a way, how would you advise people who are trying to help people seek a shidduch?
It's a great question. I'll start maybe with a very tangential quote. I'll tell them something like, Rabbi Karofkin, you never get a second chance to make a great first impression, and that we live in a very visual world, and it's to your advantage to be the best version of you, which is, you try to, sometimes you're going to cross the line because sometimes, it happens. I once was talking about that on a radio show without even mentioning who the person was. I just happened to have said that it's important on the radio show to watch your weight and to be involved, physically fit to some extent, because today, especially if we're talking to women, men have the edge in terms of numbers. That girl knew that I was talking about her. She was very upset with me. So I didn't even mention your name. I didn't say anything about you. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, people can be very delicate about it. But the facts are, we live in a very visual world, and I've had to tell people to whiten their teeth. I've had to tell people to change their glasses. I've had to tell people to come up to date on their suits, because 3 buttons went out about 10 years ago. You know what I'm saying? Or bell bottoms.
I better count my buttons. Oh, right.
So yeah, there's a bit. The external factors play a critical role today, and I'll tell them you need to make your best impression. You would do it at work. You certainly want to do it here, and that you want to be able to be the most appealing version of you that you could possibly can. But certainly not an easy task to get to touch that subject. And I have sent quite a few women for weight loss.
Wow.
Or I have told them once I got to a point where they trusted me and they were comfortable with me because they see I care about them and I want to succeed. We've waited for a certain amount of like 10 pounds to be lost, 15 pounds before we even went into the market.
Wow, that must be like shark infested waters. I mean, I would be frightened.
Not easy.
Yeah,
easy.
Not easy, because I mean, I could also hear someone responding and saying, well, I don't want to marry someone who's so superficial that all they care about is what dress size I am. And there's validity to that argument, right?
Right. I went to Eretz Yisrael. I spoke in Tel Aviv, something called the Tel Aviv International Synagogue, one night. And then the next day I spoke in Bet Knesset Hanasi. And from that, many people asked me for my card. And I had quite a few consultations. There was a woman from South Africa. And she was a 26-year-old girl who was becoming a madricha, a tour guide, right? And she says to me, I want to get set up. So I have a database, a nice database of Israeli guys. I showed it to 5 guys, no good. I showed it to another 5 guys, no good. I had already built to 20 people. At that point, I knew what the problem was. She was wearing these squinty little glasses that made her look like a librarian. She wasn't into any makeup. And I said, Karen, I want to discuss something with you now. Let's talk about some makeup, glasses. Perhaps you want to consider contact lenses. And she says, no, they have to accept me for I am. I said, Karen, can I show you a picture? So I showed her a picture of a man and a woman who were on the day of their wedding. I said, Karen, you know who that is? It's 32 years ago. That's me, and that's my wife. I'm wearing contact lenses, and so is my wife. My wife is a -7. Okay? She was thick glasses. I said to her, you have to, you're involved in a transaction, right? Woman is acquired. It's at the end of the transaction, you're the, for lack of better words, you're the commodity and he's the buyer. We want the buyer to pick up the merchandise and buy. Understand? And he should be interested in you. Consider contact lenses. All right, it was a bit of a sell. Let me tell you, there's always going to be individuals who take the high road, but those who are smart do what's, do you want to be right or do you want to be smart? Well, listen and take my advice and do something about it. There are those who say, take me for who I am. It's a big world out there. You can help. If you help this one, fine. If those who don't want to change, at the end of the day, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
Okay, enough on that topic for now. Let's give us, please, some practical advice. What can you tell a person are the best practices for a first date?
Excellent point. Okay, be well prepared. Know where you're going. Know where the person is located. Make your reservations on time. Be well groomed. You don't have to take her out for dinner, but a nice lounge, a hotel rooftop is very nice, especially this time of the year. Come prepared with an interesting story, an observation. You're not there to interrogate. And the questioning line, it's like a pyramid, will be very broad. Imagine date number one is the bottom of the pyramid. You're going to be talking about simple things. You're trying to see if you can connect with a complete stranger. You're not there to decide if they're Miss Right or Mr. Right forever. But you want to just try to make a connection with the simple basics like family, what schools did you go to, what's your career, why are you doing it? You want to look like you're interested, like as if you're, the more, I always tell people, ask good questions, recline comfortably, make good eye contact. Micro skills in communication is all the nonverbal cues that we send out. So staring at the opposite side of the room, watching all the other couples come in is not a good idea. Be totally focused on that person. Be machshiv that person. Even if you feel in your mind it's not for you, but do the edel thing. Be adin and, ask good questions, observations, tell an interesting story, share an interesting Devar Torah. Maybe you went to Eretz Yisrael, describe that experience. You're not going to dig into their emotional problems. You're not going to share yours. You're going to keep it very light, and you're going to keep it very general and very broad. Smile a lot, and warmth, appeals to people. Show an interest. Ask good questions that are not just yes or no. You're just looking to make a kesher, a light connection, to see if you and that person have something to share.
A lot of times we hear that a date went bad because the person says, well, all he was doing was talking about himself. He didn't ask me anything about me. He just wanted to talk about himself. And that's certainly a red flag, right? In other words, if a person,
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, there's a certain narcissistic personality. Maybe you could address that.
Yeah, if a person is spending most of the time hogging the stage, that's a person who is, b'shvili alam nibra. The world was made for me, and that's not why you're there for. You're there to have a dialogue, not a monologue. It's to hear what she has to say, and I've heard that too. Girls will come up and say, "He never asked me any questions about myself." So that's a huge red flag, because you're there to determine, important information about her, trying to see if she aligns with you, if you have, if you're in sync in life, you have common hashkafa, common goals, common interests.
And also marriage is all about giving to your spouse. And if all you can do on a first date is talk about yourself, that's not a good candidate for a person who you want as a giver, right?
Absolutely. Especially one of the key things that I teach guys. I'll tell you an interesting story. I said that I was an orthopedist, and years ago, I decided to develop my own line of over-the-counter arch supports, since I dispensed quite a few.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a lot, akin to like a Dr. Scholl line. Mm-hmm. And in the mornings, as I said, I was a volunteer Magid Shiur for young men. And I was preparing to show the line to the Walgreens Corporation, which is a major pharmaceutical corporation in the United States. And when I finally had my opportunity to show the line to the buyer, is before we get into the business aspect of our meeting, what do you do during the day? So I said to him, I teach young men how to become and remain happily married. So then there's this WASP from Chicago, because that's their corporate, headquarters, with 4 secretaries, all white like him, white Irish, both to the right and to the left, 2 to the right, to the left. He says, you know what? Give me an elevator pitch of what you teach these guys. So I said, Hashem, I need your help now. So I thought to myself, I said, Rob, I'm going to teach you 2 words in Hebrew. I teach my guys to treat the girl on a date or the guy or the girls that they're married to as makom rishon, first place. If you make that girl feel like she's first place, bam, you made it. And part of making someone feel like they're first place is by asking them questions, especially on a date. That means you matter. Chashuvli. You're important. If I'm asking questions about you, I'm interested. I'm deeply interested in who you are, what you're all about. That is the highest compliment you can give a girl.
Did you make the sale?
Yes.
Oh, mazel tov. Good. So they were very impressed with that.
Yeah.
Okay. How long should a first date be, and what are the things to talk about on a second date?
A good question. So the first date probably be, let's say, an hour for travel, an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours of actual date time, and then taking the young woman back home. Now, given you've spoken about family and you've spoken about schools, or you've spoken about, it depends what you covered on date number 1, but there are things like hobbies, recreation, what music do you like, who's your favorite author, Eretz Israel is always a big one. Have you been there recently? Or what have you been to seminary there and discussed some of the more interesting subject matters you liked? What tiluyim did you enjoy? Would you want to live there? You might want to ask a girl if she's been involved in chesed. That's a very big piece of advice that I'd give girls. That to me, I take from the first shidduch in history of the world. Eliezer, Eved Avraham, what was he looking for? He was looking for chesed, not because she was a PhD or she was going to become the new paradigm of the female world. So do you do chesed? Have you ever volunteered for anything like that? Are you close with your parents? Are you involved in any organizations? These are the kind of things that talk to me. That tells me that the person has amkos, has depth. You're searching for depth. And it can be a very vain, superficial world of a Korovkin. I want to see both sides, boy and girl, should be looking for some depth. What's important to you in life? What are your aspirations? What are your goals? What do you want to achieve in life? Okay, and that's how you'll know, like if that person's a giver, and that's key.
So you've covered all that on the first date. What happens on the second and third date?
So you're asking maybe deeper questions. How have you grown in the past 5 years? Who do you go to for advice if you need a mentor? Let's say you're feeling down. What do you do to raise your spirits? Tell me about your friends. Get into their friends. Who are your friends? How do you choose friends? Start getting into their psyche to see how they think, how they behave.
Is it okay to do like fun activities instead of just all of the very heavy conversation?
Absolutely. Yeah, let me tell you something. I'm happy you raised that subject. People ask me all the time, how do I know if I'm with Mr. Right or Miss Right? So I said, there's a formula. It's called the Pear Formula. And I'll explain it. It's Rashi Tevot. P is physical attraction. Physical attraction more than likely will happen in the first date or 2, but sometimes it could go up to 5 or 6. A is admiration and acceptance. Through the questioning, I come to admire the person. There are qualities about him or her that I like, that I have not seen in someone else. Acceptance is that I can accept them with the faults that they have. As we know, no one is perfect. There might be a medical condition, but it's under control. There might have been a problem with adolescence. The resume shows 2 or 3 high schools they switched in and out of because they didn't get it right. There might be a divorce. None of these, by the way, are reasons to disqualify a candidate, but tzarich iyun, needs to be looked into. Next comes what's called emotional intimacy. You're connecting. You're talking deep things together. And one of the things to create emotional intimacy is varying what you do on dates. So for sure, there is a bit of a paradigm out there on how to do this. So I'll tell my daters, okay, number 1 is drinks or maybe a walk under the nice bridge or a nice park. Number 2, maybe another, a fancy bar, or if you're into it, you're ready for dinner. Number 3 would be a place like what we call in America, Dave and Buster's, an arcade. Number 4, you may want to paint together. You absolutely want to do interactive stuff together. Why? Every time you change what you date, you see a facet to that person that you didn't see before. You never know what will take to get that aha moment. And by varying what you do on dates, you can bring that possibility to a head much more.
And what is R?
R, respect, derech eretz.
Okay.
And you see sometimes, when I had that discussion with David Lichtenstein, a problem where a lack of respect, most of the time, unfortunately, it's been the guys once they get engaged, where they'll come over to the house and they'll see modes of behavior that are not appropriate. I had a case where there was an engagement, modern Orthodox couple, and when he came over to the house for Shabbat, he didn't know how to talk to her mother. He should have just shut her down. Another case where she came over to his house and the brother was autistic and he shoot him out of the room. Oh, we don't want to hear from you. Another case where a girl went over to the guy's house for Shabbat and the mother of the boy started to say a Devar Torah. Oh, Ma, we heard that one already. We don't need to hear it again. Sometimes you'll see behavior, unfortunately, because they were trying to cover their tracks so well until the day of engagement, but then they loosen up and they let their guard down. I'd rather have a broken engagement than a young divorce.
I hear you. Someone just sent me a message, which I think, and they're asking a very, very important question. And I get this question all the time. A person has a certain condition that they've been diagnosed with. And these conditions vary from psychological conditions, physical conditions, emotional, and so forth. What needs to be revealed in advance and what does not need to be revealed in advance?
Wow, you hit me with a bomb question. Adam Bomb. It's very interesting. Well, let's take a medical condition like diabetes, for example. If it's managed and it's under control, I don't think you need to say anything about that right away. I've looked into this halachically with Rav Chaim Kanievsky, and I've read into other poskim as well. You can certainly wait until date 3 or date 4 to bring that out. Emotional conditions can be an issue. Bipolar, personality disorders that definitely have histories. Like, for example, I've handled a case with a woman who didn't take her meds. She's bipolar on Yom Kippur and had to be hospitalized with handcuffs.
Right.
And now her husband divorced her. And now one of my guys was read the shidduch. And I told him in advance, she's bipolar. She was a little upset with me. But I knew this guy had divorced his wife because there was an emotional condition that was not disclosed prior to him going out with her. It's a very tricky thing. It's very tricky. Maybe medical conditions, if they're under control, you can wait to date 3 or date 4. But if you have emotional conditions, Asperger's or bipolar, I think that and it's obvious. It's obvious. You could see from the 10-15 minute conversation that there's something going on. I would think you would have to say something about that.
Well, that's an interesting point where you say it's obvious. So many times it's not. I recently had two parents came in to see me, and they said that their daughter is having difficulty because she's too honest. That on the first date, she will tell the young man, well, I went for a psychological evaluation and I've been told that I'm on the spectrum. Now, that could mean anything. On the spectrum,
I wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, Yeah,
Very
I
great.
advised the parent against it. I said everybody's on this spectrum.
Yeah.
Everybody's
Today,
got something.
we're all a little crazy, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the tricky part. Like you say, it's very, very difficult to know when something needs to be revealed, when something will become apparent. Obviously, when you're dealing with someone who's taking medication to deal with a psychological issue, that would you say that should be at the very outset, or after how many dates? I mean, is there do you have a rule or for
You
that?
see, I'll tell you, it's too broad. You know how many people are taking pills for anxiety, especially post-COVID? Is that worthy have to be revealed? No. Depression, again, maybe day 3, day 2, because they've become, when I was in medical school, the most popular drug dispensed by physicians was for gastric upset or acid reflux. Today, it's antidepressant medication. It have to be more severe than that. More severe than that. But if it's something that is a catch-2 diagnosis that so many people deal with today, maybe day 3, day 4, but certainly that person deserves to know about it. Because unfortunately, I deal with a lot of divorced people coming back into the market, many people coming back into the market because stuff wasn't revealed to them.
Okay. I'm going to ask you one more question because I know I want to be respectful of your time. What would you advise people in preparing a resume? I know that you mentioned that people should get a coach to help them prepare their resume. But I've read so many different kinds of resumes. Some resumes read much more easily than others. They flow. They talk about what a person is looking for, sort of like a very short life history. For you, what does an ideal shidduch resume look like? What does it look like?
Okay. Just to give a little background, there's the element of society like the Haredi world where you don't get much of the personal description. You just get very dry, which is here I am, my shul, my mechotanim, etc. I am more of the believer of writing a little bit about yourself. So you want to be, because I like writing, I am taken by creative writing. I like for a person to take a little time to think about who they are, what their interests are, what their goals are, and stylistically put together a nice resume, who you are, where you're holding in Yiddishkeit means a lot to me, and give me a little bit of a blurb as to if you're learning or if you're a girl going to shiurim. Show me your passion or your idealism for Yiddishkeit. I'm not really too interested in what you do for a living, other than take a side swipe at that, because we're not here to hire you for a job, but we want to get into your kishkis of who you are as a human being. And if you can express to us some of the things you've done in Chesed, some of the volunteer work that you've done, give us an idea of what makes you tick as a human being, as a person. Tell us about your involvement with your family. Tell us about the kind of home you want to raise. A little bit. Tell us about what makes you an individual. What are your interests? What are your hobbies? What are your goals in life? And that shows us if you're a person of depth or a person who's superficial. So I would give me your dreams, your aspirations, your goals, your especially if you show me that you love your community and you want to be involved in a community when you get married and you want to be a giver. That talks to me.
Okay, so in other words, share of yourself, do it creatively, and if you're not a creative writer, speak to someone who is and can sort of help you find your words. Rabbi Dr. Cohen, if someone were interested in seeking out some assistance from you, how would they get a hold of you?
Easy. Okay. First of all, my cell phone number is pretty public to the world, so I'm going to give it out. It's 305 206 19 305 305 206 1916.
I'm putting that out there on the chat. And then what about
drjackdating.com, which is an amazing website that I built that has so many resources, lectures, drjackdating.com. No dots, no commas, no periods. drjackdating.com. Write me an email. Happy to respond.
Okay,
There you go.
I've posted both the phone number and
Yeah.
drjackdating.com on the chat. I
Yeah.
would recommend that people take a screenshot of it if you're able to. Obviously, if a person's going to have a private consultation with Rabbi Dr. Cohen, there is a consultation fee which is perfectly appropriate. And people, I want to remind people who are interested in consulting with people who are involved in this professionally, like Rabbi Dr. Cohen, and that is that people really give of their time, and they do it with love. They do it with l'shem shamayim, but you also have to realize that people have to eat. And if you're going to be, one of the biggest challenges I think that for people who are trying to help singles is that sometimes there are singles who are extremely grateful for the amount of time and effort that goes into really trying on their behalf. And then there are times when people who perhaps have been in the single market for a while, they get jaded and they become somewhat agitated if we offer them words of advice or tell them that this person wasn't interested. And I guess maybe if I could just ask you to finish with this, what advice would you give to a single person who's working with shadchanim or working with friends or family that are trying to help them? Obviously, some people do not perhaps approach their desire to help with a sufficient amount of wisdom, but also the single person needs to be gracious as well in the way that they accept advice and in the way that they respond to individuals. So what would you suggest to a single person who is seeking the help of someone who's trying to help them?
It's a great point. First of all, you should have a gratitude mindset. One of the things that I encourage all my singles to do is to say a simple prayer called the Tefillat HaTodah, just in English. Be grateful. Be grateful. You're not married, grateful for everything you have in your life. Secondly, pick someone who invests. I'm not here to toot my own horn. Pick someone to work with who invests quite a bit of their life to doing this work. This work is not simple work. This work, you have no idea how many weddings I miss at night and how many bar mitzvahs I miss at night. I literally give up my life. And I'm here to relax or to unwind or to restore myself. My nights, most of the time, finish at 1:32 in the morning. And that's typical for me. So what I would tell them is that try to take a perspective that Begin Again Now was a book that Rav Zelig Politskin wrote once, to try to forget about the past, to be grateful for what you have in front of you now, to pick one individual that you want to work with, and let that person be your sideline coach the rest of the way, and share that with him, and together develop a strategy and go with it all the way. The problem that I see most people is they're penny wise and pound foolish. They'll come to me for one or two sessions and they quit in the middle. Of course it costs money. Doesn't the dentist cost money? Doesn't the carpenter cost money? Doesn't the electricity supplier cost money? Do you know, I walk around with Mesilat Yesharim in my hand simply to always remind myself not to be upset. Because when I was in private enterprise, you work and you pay and you got paid. It doesn't happen here. Quite a bit of time. It doesn't happen here. And my job is to always remind myself to love Klal Yisrael no matter what. In spite of the fact that this one is, like you said, jaded, and this one is not happy. But you do your best. That's all you can. You know what? I'll never forget. When I went into the operating room and I did an orthopedic surgery, I could tell you 99% before the surgical procedure what my results were. The biggest challenge to my life is the closing rate or the success rate in doing shidduchim is so poor compared to what I used to do for a living that I once heard Reb Chaim tell someone who was ready to quit. He was successful in 1 out of, say, or 2 out of 700. He says, that's great. Like, Baruch Hashem, from speaking for myself, the last 4 months were dry, but prior to that, I did 7 shidduchim, 50-year-old plus. since August. And, it comes in waves. And part of it, I have to always push myself and motivate myself. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. I had a couple of cases that were going 9 months recently. And as much as it's hard for the single, do you think it's easy on the other end? It takes a lot of self-motivation to push yourself to continue to want to help and to want to be there and to be sympathetic and to be caring and to love it. I'm constantly asking Hashem to give me a great attitude, a positive attitude, and to always just go kadima, as it says in the IDF. Forward.
Yeah.
That's what my
And
father
it must,
was
you just touched on that point, but it must be so challenging to when you see a couple dragging their legs and to try sometimes you have to be the closer, right? They call that the closer. Yeah.
Oh, a lot. I'll give you a case right now, and I'll close with this. I have 2 kids that are on the spectrum. He's 21 and she's 19. They found me on Facebook. She found me on Facebook. His mother does not like her at all. This girl was taken out of her home with her 3 siblings by social services because her parents were not fit to raise her. So she's being raised by a loving, warm family in our community. And it's been a tug of war 6 or 7 months between myself. Every time the parent of the boy said, break them up, I would try. There they are, knocking on my door on Shabbat, wishing me a Shabbat Shalom. You're back together again for the 20th time? So now I said to them, that's it. I told them to get engaged on Tu B'Av. So he says to me, Raymond says to me, okay, but I want to speak to my mother one last time to see if she'll say yes, last Sunday. So he speaks to her. She says, Raymond, you could do better. She's not the best for you. She has stuff. I called her up, and on Tuesday, I said, or Wednesday, whatever it was, I said, you know what, Mrs. XYZ, maybe just put the gauntlet down. Let them get married. They love each other. I've spoken to them. One thing they have is amazing unity. I told him, I need you to go to shul. I need you to go to classes 3 times a week. I told the same thing to the young woman, and they're making a lot of progress. So they just announced I said to them, they were here Erev Shabbat, and I said to them, L'chaim Tuesday night, no matter what. You don't have to wait for your parents. It's too late. It's been a year. Done. So he announced his L'chaim for this Tuesday night.
Mazel tov. Mazel tov. And it's good to end. It's good to end with a mazel tov. Rabbi Dr. Jack Cohen, Chazak ve'ematz. Thank you for the work you're doing. And I hope we get a chance to meet you in person soon. Enjoy the rest of your vacation.
Hashem, it'll be my honor.
All right. Great. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we hope we can do this again real soon.